Mark, if you can share a brief insight into you, please.
Absolutely. I am a senior operating partner with a number of private equity firms here in the US and also on the board of a family-owned business. And my background is tech, turnarounds, CEO, private equity held, family-owned, and I enjoy fixing things. And so that's what drew me into the private equity world to go help create value during the whole period. So something I'm pretty passionate about and something I've had quite a lengthy career now, being involved in everything from my early career at Apple, then HP, then on to Bose and a few other companies, and now working for Riverside, a well-known 35-year-old PE firm focused on the lower end of the mid-market. Also work for Cathay Capital, a French Chinese PE firm, a family office owned portco. So lots of activities.
Perfect. And what is one mistake that you see private equity firms or portfolio companies making, and what actions would you suggest to correct them?
I think the sense of urgency early in the hold period is probably the biggest mistake, and the regrets that I think all of us have is, oh, I wish we had done this sooner. And that's everything from replacing the CEO, the CFO, or whatever part of the C-suite, investing in IT capabilities, and placing some bigger bets early on, some big capex, growth capex early on. I think we all wish we had, an extra 6 months or 9 months or 12 months of runway. And I think when your gut tells you need to replace the CEO, you should do it, and do it professionally and respectfully. But we only have a 5-year hold period, and time is of the essence. So I think the sense of urgency of making some of the bigger decisions earlier would be the biggest mistake that we learn from over time. But I think we can continue to get better at it.
Why do you think that private equity firms, portfolio companies in that early stages have that lack of action or urgency, as you put it, in those initial phases? What would you put it down to?
Some of it's risk. Some of it is who's calling the shots. Let's say if you have a very investment banking, financially driven view of the value creation, that's one kind of lens. And if you have maybe a more balanced financial and operational view of the world, that's where an operating partner fits in. I think you might have a different timeline, different sense of urgency, different decisiveness, I think, that comes to the mix, and just balancing pros and cons. I think that's part of why some companies are better at it, and some companies, some PE firms are not as sophisticated.
And you work with a variety of different private equity firms and therefore board members on different businesses. What are some of the things that you try and get in early with those businesses that you think maybe in your early stage of being an operating partner you'd have held off on because of the reasons you've just suggested?
I think getting involved, I think that the opportunity is to get involved earlier in the deal life cycle, and that means before the close. And this is what I hear from a lot of my peers in the industry, a lot of operating partners, is they get kind of pulled in last minute once the deal is closed and we can now own it. And they're like, okay, toss it over the fence and let's go drive the value creation. If you have the benefit, and I've benefited from this myself, if you have 3 to 6 months runway prior to close, you can start to work with the management team. You can start to work on the value creation plan. You can start to tee up some of those big decisions you're going to make day one, including changing personnel or launching some big initiatives, and getting buy-in from the management team well ahead of the close. Now, that may be wasted bandwidth if the deal doesn't close. That happens. But I think the trade-off is, when you feel that the probability of closing is high, the operating partner should start to step in and shouldn't just be deal team led. I think the operating partner should be actively involved, start to get their hands on the steering wheel, and start to work with the management team to say, hey, we're going to be partners for the next 5 years. Let's start learning how to work together. And I think that's one of the lessons learned is if you can get involved early, you can start to drive value creation sooner, get buy-in sooner, make big decisions sooner. And even a precious 3 to 6 months can mean the difference between a better exit or an earlier exit later in the whole cycle.
That makes a lot of sense. So talk to us about the different models used by private equity now for the operating partner position, and how you see that it's been further and further adopted by the North American market.
Well, I think the fact that you mentioned North American is interesting. I find that the rest of the world is yet to adopt the operating partner model. The UK is far behind, France very far behind. From my personal experience in the rest of Europe, private equity firms just don't get it. They haven't seen that and think that a deal team alone and a bunch of investment banker DNA is sufficient to drive value creation. Unfortunately, here in the US, people have um, gotten religion about this. And I think there are very few firms that don't have an operating partner model of sorts. There are a couple of models that I'm familiar with. The one that I experienced with Riverside and some of our partners, uh, competitors, friendly competitors in the industry have alternative models. I'll compare and contrast the one which is more of a central pool of consultants. And these people are functionally expert at digital transformation, supply chain logistics, IT implementations, marketing, human capital, whatever their expertise is, CFO, and they get parachuted into Portco for a few weeks or a few months, and then get pulled back to the central pool, and they get kind of launched off to various Portcos as the needs arise, but they're not assigned to a specific Portco. The Riverside model, which I really enjoy, we're all pretty much ex-CEOs that have usually been CEOs of private equity owned firms. And therefore, we're more like generalists or decathletes. We're good at about 10 sports. We're not world class at absolutely everything, but we're dangerous enough on every topic, and then can go pull the right consultant, the right expert from the outside whenever we have a specific need. And in the Riverside model, that means we tend to we stay with the portfolio company for its entire life cycle, from inception to exit. And here again, in Riverside's case, the operating partner tends to be the chairman of the board as well, which gives you a governance role, gives you a hierarchy, the CEO, and also from an employee standpoint, they understand, they don't understand what an operating partner is, but they understand what chairman of the board is. So I like that model, but there are various models out there, and I think they all can create value. And that's always an interesting thing to compare with peers in the industry, how they set up their operating partner model. Riverside has invested heavily. Of the 300 plus employees at Riverside, I think there are almost 60 of us, not 70 of us, that are operating partners. So, pretty heavy investment. Also because we have a large number of portcos across our funds. We're lower in the mid market, which means we have lots of small, beautiful companies that we try and grow, as opposed to some of the larger funds that tend to have, less than a dozen maybe investments at any point in time. But it's a big investment. And I think it's hopefully one that people understand the value creation that is driven by the operating partner.
So I'm interested with your reference. I completely agree with you that Europe and probably the rest of the world is well behind the States in a lot of things when it comes to private equity, but that particularly of the operating partner model in its tradition self. We've seen more operating partner type individuals being ex-consultants than ex-executives in Europe than we definitely see in North America, which is predominantly ex-chief executives, although people like a Platinum Equity and some of the big boys will have those kind of funnels, but a lot of the kind of, as they put it, managing directors of operations and other titles tend to come from ex-CXO or have been very senior consultant basis. So it's not rule of thumb. Why do you think that Europe's lagging behind North America from adopting, bringing people like yourself in?
I think it's maybe because Europe is more conservative on spending and investing early in the hold cycle. And I see this in everything from board fees to equity for board members. Europe is behind, and yes, it's an investment to have a dedicated operating partner. It's there's going to be a chairman slash operating partner fee. There's going to be equity that goes to the operating partner, and so that's technically cost. The U.S. Private equity world, I think, is on the math that they're going to get a fantastic return on that, and it'll pay multiples of that investment. And I find that Europe is behind. I don't want to use the word cheap, but they're more conservative on the investment, and therefore they're not willing to bring on board full time an operating partner who's going to cost a full salary and a bunch of equity. That's kind of how we're motivated, how we're rewarded. And therefore they think they can get away with some young, fresh out of MBA and investment banking, what I call young professionals that have never actually run a company, never managed a team. And I think that that's naive, candidly. And I've lived in that world, so trust me, I'm speaking from firsthand knowledge. And I think it's naive and just short-sighted not to invest in operating partners. And I think everyone here in the U.S. has figured out that's how you're going to drive faster and higher return on the investment thesis.
So value creation is a term incredibly well used. It's nearly probably rivaling strategy that's discussed in the private equity world as of now. What's your take on value creation and what it means in today's private equity environment?
So it's a lot less about financial engineering, which I think was still possible when money was essentially free. Now interest rates have, reverted somewhat to the norm, or will soon revert to the norm, and therefore you have to drive real operational improvement, and can't just rely on kind of financial constructs, which are helpful too. But I think you need to look at the entire P&L and the cash generation opportunities to create value, and it starts with everything from the top line to pricing, product categories, routes to market, all your costs, manufacturing costs, your supply chain, your logistics, and then all your SG&A and your overhead. And where do you want to place bets? Where do you want to invest? And where will you get the best return on investment during that hold period? And how can you craft the best story upon exit for the next owner, whether they're private equity, strategic, for them to see why they should pay a premium that you're looking for on exit. And I think that's what an operating partner brings to the party, is that roadmap, that value creation roadmap that is much more operational, rolling up your sleeves, detailed work on the ground with the management team. And you need to have that roadmap ready to go day one when you only have 5 years. And 5 years goes by really fast. People think it's a long time. It's a midterm horizon, but boy, does it go fast. An ERP implementation is a year. If you replace the CEO or the CFO, it takes them at least 6 to 9 months just to get up to cruising altitude. You're inevitably going to have some crisis, whether it's the shipping lanes in the Red Sea, the Suez Canal get shut down, or something like, God forbid, something like COVID, or tariffs kick in, or a shortage of a commodity. Something will happen during the hold period. So you really have to accelerate the value creation agenda and start firing on as many cylinders as possible starting day one, because you only have 5 years. And the last year of the hold is really the one where you're starting to package it up to sell it. So you don't necessarily want to be investing at the tail end of the hold period either. You want to be maximizing the beauty of the prize that you're trying to sell to the next owner.
And talk to us about the bit of a new initiative. We had an individual on the podcast talking about employee ownership, and that's increasing attractiveness in Europe for that model as an exit strategy, but still to retain control of a business, should I say, for a lot of founder owners in Europe. What's your take on how that's actually being adopted further with private equity firms in the US?
So can you give me the example that you're highlighting here from Europe, just so I understand exactly the context?
Yeah, so there's a lot of like founder owners will sell, which might be different to positioning here, but will sell the business in essence to the employees, still remain as the chief executive of the organization, and in essence, the business, the employees owe the owner the money he's already taken out and needs to pay it back. It's a bit of a weird model, but it's incredibly tax efficient, so I'm told. Not something I'm exploring myself, hence the not knowledge on it. But I don't know how that compares exactly to that kind of what you've started to see in the States from that employee ownership initiative.
So I've not seen the model that you just talked about. What we are seeing is family owners, founder owners that want to monetize, either because the heirs don't want to take over the business, or because they just want to kind of cash out and maximize their enjoyment of retirement. And so certainly in the lower end of the mid-market, that's something that Riverside sees a lot of, and we like to do that because we think we can help them monetize their entrepreneurial adventure, and then make it a stronger and bigger company while preserving employment, and then giving us the opportunity to merge a few things together and get some scale, and they can be proud of that, even though they're no longer owners. So we see a lot more of that, buying from families and founders. The employee ownership model that we have started to see emerge here in the US, and one that I'm very excited about, is one called Ownership Works. KKR, one of our peers in the industry, well, peers, they're a huge PE firm. They launched this at one of their portcos, and Pete Stavros, who runs KKR, actually spun this off into a nonprofit and called Ownership Works. And Riverside is one of the founding members of Ownership Works, along with KKR and a number of our peers in the industry. And it essentially is a broad-based employee ownership program that is there to create wealth and access to an asset class that your average employee will just never have access to. Traditionally, in the PE world, the limited partners, our investors, make money. And by the way, our investors are the majority of them, like 3/4 of them, are pension funds, firemen, policemen, teachers, and then some endowments for different organizations, universities, etc. That's who stands to make money when we invest their money that they ask us to be good stewards of. Obviously, the GP, so the PE firm, we make money because that's part of kind of the risk and the value that we add. And then traditionally, a thin layer of management stands to make some money if the exit is positive. So the CEO and the C-suite. What we started to do a few years ago at Riverside was to go deeper than just the C-suite. So out of, let's say, 500 employees, we would go after the top 50 or 75 that would have stock options or some form of equity. But we felt that wasn't enough. And that what this Ownership Works program allows you to do is to actually give 100% of the employees some skin in the game with no risk, no downside, no out-of-pocket money. There's no payroll deduction. If we hit our investment thesis, we usually target 6 months of salary for the employees when we exit. So it's kind of a win-win-win. Our investors will make money, Riverside will make money, management will make money, but more importantly, every single employee that's eligible will make money. So think of, and this is true for hourly wage workers, so people that are paid 18, 20, whatever, $22 an hour, they stand to make life-changing money through this program. And obviously they have to create the value that we intend to get at the end. But it's that ownership mindset we think is transformative. All of a sudden, the waste elimination, new product innovation, customer satisfaction, attrition, retention, safety, all these things that you will get as kind of discretionary value add because people walk into the office saying, "Ooh, I'm an owner now, and I'm going to think differently." And the analogy I like to use is when you rent a home, you don't take care of it as much as when you own a home. When you own a home, you're going to go spend the weekend at Home Depot getting that touch-up paint, getting that caulk. You're going to add the jacuzzi. You're going to redo the landscaping. You're going to add the second car garage, whatever you're going to do to make your house more valuable when you sell it. And when you rent, you want to get your safety deposit back, but that's about the extent of how much you care about it. And we think that mindset shifts for employees, in particular the employees who just would never have access to this kind of wealth creation, we think is transformative. Accompanying this program, which I think is really an essential part, is the financial education. A lot of the employees just don't get the financial resilience they need to understand how to manage their finances. It's kind of a windfall. What we want to make sure is that they get the personalized advice to pay off that 25% credit card debt, to start a 529 plan for their college fund for their kids, which is generational transformation. They pay down their mortgage or they maximize their IRA or their 401k. But we want to give them the means before the exit to be good stewards of this wealth creation and this asset class that they, a private equity group will never have. So we think it's a wonderful program. I've rolled it out. I've been very fortunate to be leading this on the other side. I've rolled this out for 3 of my portfolio companies. We toured to every single site, and these companies have between 400 and 700 employees, and the majority are manufacturing, logistics, or call center, so hourly wage workers. And this could transform their lives and transform the communities in which these companies are. And that's the even bigger impact. It's generational and community transformation by this kind of wealth creation. So I would encourage people to go check it out. They're on LinkedIn, on YouTube, plenty of examples of companies that have launched this. And we think it's a great initiative. And it's, I think, one of the tools in the private equity toolkit that more and more PE firms are signing up to, because it's the right thing to do. And it's also a good thing to do because you're going to get your money's worth in this investment, because you will have more engaged employees, more ownership-minded employees, which will inevitably create value. And value means our investors make more money, we make more money, management makes more money, and the employees now will make money too.
Seems like a pretty good initiative to run and gets everybody bought in. Same reason why executives get an equity position, just brings everybody into the table and inspires everybody to focus on the outcome.
Absolutely. And you transform your town hall meetings into shareholder meetings. That alone, just the language alone, is a mindset there, and people will come in. It's a great retention tool. It's a great employer of choice, because basically people will come and want to work for you, and they'll say, "Ooh, you have this program? Trust me, we're touting this to our investors. We're touting this to the portfolio companies that we look to acquire, but our portfolio companies are touting this to prospective employees and saying, join us because you're going to be an employee and an owner employee from day one." And that's pretty compelling, and not something that people usually associate with private equity.
No, that isn't something at all. So that's I appreciate you sharing that. I wasn't aware of the initiative being adopted in private equity for that. So it sounds like it's a very good initiative.
Indeed, it's one we're very proud to be one of the founding members, along with our partners in the ownership works at KKR and a number of other premier PE firms, and more are joining. And I think there was a recent segment, I think, on 60 Minutes, Pete Stavros, who's the KKR gentleman, founder of all this. He just put, I think it was a 30-minute section on 60 Minutes on this program, and it's worth watching. It's I think proofs that PE can be a force for good in the capitalist and financial world, and not just evil billionaires in Manhattan that pillage and tear apart companies. That's not what we do. We actually buy companies to make them better and stronger and more resilient. And we're not always successful, but I think the private equity world's batting average is pretty good. And we create more jobs, preserve more jobs, create more tax base, and create better companies here in the United States and in the world. I think it's a force for good, and if we can share in the wealth creation with the people who are actually doing the value creation, who are the employees, I think that's only fair. It's a win-win. So I think it's a wonderful program.
Absolutely. What are your influences, Marc? What do you read, watch, listen to, you recommend others check out?
Well, I wish I had more time to read. I read a lot of emails, which is probably not the most intellectually stimulating, let's say for long-term intellectual development. A lot of podcasts, a lot of business news. Try and read interesting business cases. I try immerse myself also just at least once a year to go back to do some executive education. And so I do this like mini business school, Harvard business school, mini university thing every year, just to be exposed to different, thinking out there, new tools in the toolkits, new trends, and just to immerse myself in the business case world, which I think is kind of fun. So I try and do that, and then attend a lot of networking events, and then just network with a lot of people, peers in the industry, various operating partner forums and speaking engagements and being on panels, and I tend to absorb by osmosis. So that's my main means of feeding myself intellectually.
Keep yourself reading and learning from that. If anybody wishes to reach out to you post this, Marc, how best do they get in touch, please?
LinkedIn. Look up Marc Jourlait, M-A-R-C. That's the French spelling, and last name is Jourlait, which is French, Jourlait. Look me up. I'm the only Marc Jourlait out there on LinkedIn, and we'll usually respond within less than 24 hours to anybody who just direct messages me on LinkedIn. That's the best way, and then we'll be connected.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, Marc. I appreciate your insight into the operating partner model, employee ownership initiatives, and other bits and pieces you've left us with today. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Alex.
And as always, to all our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in yet again to the Private Equity Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe, and the next podcast will be out, which comes out every single week. But till the next time, keep smashing it, and thank you very much for listening.